just gonna grab my notebook.
Yeah, I should actually.
Zoning resolution.
All right, looks like we are live.
All right. Should we call roll, Michelle?
Yes, I will
Right.
call roll. Mr. Bahavich,
Yes.
Mr. Dove,
Here.
Mr. McNulty, Mr. Doherty, and Ms. Trevellis.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. I will say I have not heard yet from Mr. McNulty on whether or not he's able to attend this meeting. I just reached out to him, so hopefully he can. And then as far as Mr. Doherty goes, he is unable to attend, and we'll talk about, we might have another open seat on the zoning commission, but we can talk about that at a later date. So we have a full quorum. So Adam, if you don't mind swearing in the witnesses.
Yep. Anyone who intends to testify, please raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? State, I do.
I do.
And when it's your turn to offer testimony, please state your full name, address, and affirm that you've been sworn in. Anyone who intends to offer comments or testimony through the online chat room function also needs to be sworn in remotely. Before your initial comment, please type your name, address in the words, I affirm, to indicate that you solemnly swear that the testimony that you are offering is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All right. So at this point, I think I'd like to ask the board to have a motion to come back from recess for the Route 23 Corridor Overlay District.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Pahovich to come back from recess for the Route 23 Corridor Overlay District, second by Ms. Trevellis. Those voting, Mr. Pahovich?
Yes.
Mr. Dove?
Yes.
And Ms. Trevellis?
Yes.
Well, I think I'll leave it to Holly Matty, our planning consultant for this project, to move forward with the next agenda item, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Is that okay with the chair? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just, Michelle, did you want to run through what we got from legal, or should we do that after?
Well, I'm gonna, Holly, do you mind just kind of
I
giving
can
me an overview on that?
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
fine with
great.
And then
Yeah.
Holly, just since we're doing the test, we're trying to,
That works.
yeah, can you state your name and address for the record?
Yes, I'm Holly Matty. I'm with Crossroads Community Planning. My address is 49 Stony Bluff Way, Lithopolis, Ohio. Thanks for having me tonight. We did meet with legal counsel since the last draft has been prepared. Legal counsel is Brocious, Johnson and Greggs out of Columbus, and they have provided us with a memo that is shown on your screen. It's a couple pages long, but it really encompasses two overarching comments. And we as a team, as far as staff from the township and Delaware County and myself, agree with both comments. We plan to revise the document based upon these recommendations. The first one has to do with modifications. The way the current draft is written is that there is what would be pre-development plan modifications and post-development plan approval amendments. And the first one, the pre-development plan approval modifications, are split between minor and major modifications. And then the amendments after the development plan is approved just go to the zoning commission if it's a major, and the trustees if it's if it's a major, and trustees if it's a minor. The legal counsel feels it's a little confusing having all of those different processes tied into these two different modifications. They've recommended a more streamlined process. And what that will do is what they're calling the pre-development plan approvals will be referred to as divergences. And they feel that that's more consistent with the way you do that currently with your PUDs. And those divergences would just be identified in their development plan when it's submitted to the zoning inspector. And the zoning inspector would then make a recommendation to the trustees whether or not those divergences should or should not be approved as part of that development plan. There would be no minor or major. It would just all be divergences identified at the development plan stage, approved by the trustees. Then what they're recommending is at the post-development plan approvals that those be referred to as modifications, and those be the minor and the major modifications. Anything that's minor, which we had outlined previously in the regulations, could be approved administratively by the zoning inspector. Anything that's major would be sent back to the trustees for approval, and because they are considered a major amendment to the development plan. And they feel that keeping that consistent with the trustees' approval for both of those makes it a much clearer process and provides a more legally defensible document in their mind. So we've agreed to both of those.
So
The
it never goes back to the zoning commission?
It does not. They felt like it needed to stay in that trustees level because they're the ones that originally approved it.
And whose attorneys are these?
They are hired, they were retained by the Delaware County Finance Authority.
Yep.
So the
just a quick-
second recommendation is
Hey, Holly.
Yes,
I think somebody had a comment.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Holly, just to clarify this, because it is kind of a little bit confusing. So, before we talked about, like you did mention this just now, but, we had the minor or major. If it was minor, it would go directly to the trustees and skip over the zoning board. If it's major, then it would come down through zoning and then go on. Are you saying now in the pre-review, it would essentially go to the zoning inspector, who would make a determination based on whatever the divergences are, if it needs to go to zoning or just directly towards the trustees? Is that correct?
In this case, what's being recommended is that it would stay with the trustees. It would never go back to the zoning commission. So the zoning inspector could approve administratively the minor modifications. The major modifications would go to the trustees and the trustees only, because they're the original approving body.
So really the zoning commission is cut out entirely of the 23 corridor.
There is the pre-application process where up to 2 zoning commission members can attend that pre-application meeting and provide insight and input during that process.
But in that text, it says they may attend. It doesn't say they shall attend. So is that an invite thing?
Well, I have no
Doesn't-
problem changing that to shall.
Okay. It just doesn't seem like it's a requirement to have anyone attend that.
Okay, no, we can change that.
And then Holly, I thought it was all modifications would have to be ultimately up to the trustees. Because when you said minor versus major.
No, they still wanted us to have minor and major for the post-development. And you could
Okay.
administratively approve the minors.
Okay.
Because we talked about if somebody came in with a 40-foot height for a commercial, and then they wanted to raise it to 43 feet, that would be within the 5 feet of what they got approved for, and you could
I
administratively.
see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Michelle, I have a question, I guess, and maybe you don't have the answer for this right now, but I guess I'm having a hard time with, so, you know, if something was to come in and it had what would have previously been under major modifications, you know, someone's asking for something that's well beyond what the code allows. Are the trustees comfortable with then taking that and not having our input or recommendations sent to them? Are they on board with just all these applications going directly to them?
From my understanding that, yes. And then staff would review it as if we review any planned district that comes in and identify all the list of divergences that they're requesting. We would share that report with the trustees and they would ultimately decide on that. But as far as my understanding that they are comfortable with this process, yes.
They
Okay.
want this process. It's not that they're comfortable with it. This is the way they want to do this corridor.
Is that what I'm hearing? Because in the past, they have been uncomfortable making these decisions, or when they were made, they created issues for the township because they don't have necessarily a background in zoning and its implications.
Christine, I think you're absolutely correct on that. But I believe that was prior boards at this time.
So the prior boards and so the new boards have no
Yes.
problem with taking on zoning responsibilities, is what you're saying. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to catch up on.
That's okay.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on that before I go to the second?
No.
Okay. Then the second comment has to do with the application and development plan contents. We heard from the development side of things, and it was reiterated from the legal standpoint that the contents of the development plan were pretty stringent, and that compared to other communities, they felt like what was written in there was more than what's required in other townships, and that it could potentially be cost prohibitive for someone to pull down the cloud, and that they may try to avoid pulling down the cloud and go with the underlying zoning district instead. We have made some modifications to the text, which are in the draft that you reviewed today, because we had heard that from the development side of things, on a few things. Some of it had to do with detailed engineering. We did have in there some language in the first draft talking about size of the pipes and things like that, that really at a zoning stage, developers probably don't know exact sizes. So we changed that to preliminary engineering, preliminary layouts of the buildings, those sorts of things. We've changed that language. A couple of the things that they wanted us to do, we said, no, we want to keep that in there. The lighting plan requirements, we kept that in there. They wanted us to possibly, and they being the development side, wanted us to eliminate some of the language regarding the county engineer's approval for access and deed restrictions for keeping the open space maintained. So what we did there was we kept the language in there for all of those, but we required a commitment letter or a letter of intent. So a letter of intent of how they were going to maintain their open space, and that they are required to provide those actual covenants or restrictions to the zoning inspector before a zoning permit is issued for construction. The letter from the county engineer's office specifically stating that they have reviewed for access and access is feasible. The letter from the county sanitary engineer's office would say that there is water and sewer available or whatever whoever the water or sewer provider is, that it's available and has capacities to service the site. So basically saying exactly what we want in those letters instead of leaving it open-ended, to give the developers a little more predictability of what we're looking for. So we made those changes, and those changes are in your second draft that you reviewed for tonight. What's not in the changes is some of the traffic studies. We made some changes to the traffic study requirements, but legal counsel recommended even further changes. So the draft that you reviewed for tonight created a tiered system for the traffic study. Previously, we just required a traffic study, and that caused major concerns that they were going to have to pay for this study up front and possibly not get approved. So we created a tiered system where if you were under a certain peak hour or new vehicle trips added, then you didn't have to do a study at all. That was like, I believe it's 100 trips, peak hour trips. So very small development. You wouldn't have to do a traffic study at all. Then we created a middle level where the developer is required to do a traffic study, but he could delay it until after the development plan's approved, as long as he agreed to include all of the recommendations coming out of the traffic study as approved by the Delaware County engineer or ODOT or the township who have, if they hire an engineer to review township roads. So they have to get the approvals of the traffic study by the permitting authority, and then the developer would have to agree to implementing all of those before a zoning permit is issued. The third part of the traffic study requirements is larger developments over, I think it's 750 peak hour trips or larger, would have to do the traffic study upfront with the development plan. Legal counsel felt that that was something that is not typically required at the zoning stage, and recommended that we do away with that third tier and that we leave everything in that second tier. So if you're a small development, you don't have to do one. If you're anything over that smaller size, you still have to do it, and you can have the option of doing it after the development plan's approved, as long as they agree to implement all of the recommendations that were approved by the permitting authorities. If we're going to include language in there, if they do not agree to any of the recommendations that are approved by the permitting authority, then they have to come back to the township to get a revised development plan approved. So it's putting the burden on the developer to make sure that those things get done, but allowing them to delay it until after the development plan process. So do you have any questions or comments about that?
So is the director of our zoning then the legal entity that's determining when and if they need to have this traffic count?
So the director of zoning or zoning inspector is the person that is signing off on the zoning permit to move to the construction stage. But that person, that zoning inspector, is relying on the permitting authorities of the roads to say the traffic study has been done, it's been reviewed, it's been done to their requirements, and they approve of the recommendations. So the zoning inspector is not making any kind of interpretation. The zoning inspector is strictly enforcing what the permitting authorities are saying needs to be done.
And who's determining the trip count amounts to determine when they need to do their?
So in the zoning text, it refers to the ITE document for trip studies, which is the traffic engineers documents that they all use to determine the trips per use. And they would, they being the developer, would say, this is the use that we're proposing. The ITE says this number of trips, and the permitting authority would have to agree that they're using the correct numbers.
Okay, so the permitting authority is agreeing if they're using the correct numbers. The zoning department has no stake in that. It's all based on if it's ODOT or whoever jurisdiction the road is under, is what you're saying.
Well, we've left it to the permitting authority because they're the ones that review traffic studies on a daily basis and understand it. I feel that they're the more experienced entity in that.
That's
Oh.
kind of what we do that now. If any, like, anything comes in a plan district, I just communicate with the county engineers and make sure that, they're
So I
working with them on that.
I guess since I'm not familiar with the process, so let's say the developer says, oh, it's under 100 trips, we don't have to do anything. It never, when does it go to the permitting authority to get reviewed? To say, oh, you're right, this is under 100 trips, it doesn't matter. Or no, you're wrong, this is going to be 1,000 trips, you need to do a, I don't know, phase 2 or an extra study or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That would be identified at the development plan stage. So the
Okay.
developer would say, I'm under the 100 trips per day. It would be on the zoning inspector to go to the permitting authorities and say, they're telling me this, is this correct? If they say, yes, it's correct, then they move forward without the traffic study. If they say no, then the zoning inspector says, no, this is not correct, you need to revise it.
Okay.
Or identify that to the trustees when it goes in front of the trustees. This is, they're telling me this, but the permitting authority is telling me this is wrong.
So then the trustees decide if they're going to go with the permitting authority that says you need, this model, as opposed to the developer, which says, no, we don't have that many trips.
Correct.
So, okay. So the trustees are going to sort of be the decision maker as to whether the developer is correct in the traffic counts or whether the ODOT or whatever jurisdiction that road is under is correct.
It would have to be the trustees making that decision, yes, because they're the body approving the development plan.
But when it comes to the actual permitting after the development plan's approved, I mean, the county reviews our engineering plans. So if the county says, oh, wait, no way, this isn't going to work, and the layout does have to change, well, it has to go back to the trustees and start over.
Correct.
I don't know if that's where you were getting at, Christine, but.
Yeah, sort of I was getting at.
Okay.
If there's a disagreement, I'm assuming like ODOT's going to say, no, you can't put a curb cut there off the 20.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we have the permitting authority as the
I assume
entity.
a say in that, as opposed to, oh, let's just, put a curb cut where we want it, not where ODOT tells us we want it. So I was just trying, like I said, I'm trying to catch up with what's going on here.
Sure, yeah.
So thank you.
Yep.
Proceed.
That's all I have on the legal review. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, or I'm happy to go on to a review of what we've done in the second draft.
I don't have anything else for legal.
Okay. All right, so let's go on to the changes in the second draft, some of which I've already discussed because of the legal comments, but we'll just start here at the beginning of the memo. The purpose section, I just added some language saying that any word that we have defined in this section is capitalized throughout the document. That's something that I've just always have done in the past, and something that's been recommended to me as I've written codes over the years, just so that people can know, hey, that is a term that is defined. So we just clarified that in the purpose statement. In the overlay established, there have been no changes made at this point in time. In the sub areas, if you recall at the last meeting, we discussed removing single family sub area. We have done that, so that is now out, and any area that's referred to with single family uses has been removed from the text. So not only the single family sub area, but any single family uses within the mixed use area have also been removed.
And remind me why we removed single family?
Because of the densities, there was concerns with the densities that were being proposed, And it was decided that the best thing was to allow those areas to develop under their existing PUD requirements where those densities have already been established. So they've just been removed out of the overlay.
So basically, a developer, if they have a proposal for a single family development, they would have to go through the traditional plan
Yes.
development that we do currently just for single family.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
But single family can't go in the 23 overlay, correct? Because there's not an area zone for that.
They can't pull the cloud down for single family. If there's something that is currently has a PUD for single family that's been approved, that zoning continues to run with the land, and they can choose to continue to move forward with that and not pull down this cloud.
Or they can file a rezoning, right?
Yes.
So if it's not already zoned single family, anything new would have to be underneath this overlay, is what you're saying, unless they go through the process of having the property rezoned.
When you say anything new, do you mean any new single family?
Yes,
Yes, that's correct.
I'm not referring to commercial or provisions that are in this overlay, but, okay.
And the trustees would do that rezoning.
Well, I was assuming if it's done,
So, yeah, the rezoning will still go through zoning commission. It just will go as pursuant to the ORC, zoning commission, or regional planning zoning commission, and the trustees.
Mhm.
Anything else before I go on? All right, so for procedure, we added the additional stakeholders to the review process, which I already touched on. That's adding the zoning commission members as well as some other entities. I can change that language to shall. I have no problem doing that to help address the issue that came up tonight. I've already talked about the changes to the submittal requirements and the traffic impact studies, so I'm not going to go over that in any more detail. And I also talked about the minor and major modifications and what we need to do to change that to meet our legal review recommendations. Going on to prohibited uses. This is an area where we expanded, and this is based upon the feedback at the last meeting. There was concern that the commercial uses specifically were too broad in the commercial office area, and that really anything that was commercial related could come in. And it was identified at that meeting that the commission wanted us to look at some of the negotiated approved land uses for some of the PUDs in the area. And when I looked at those, Michelle was kind enough to send those off to me. I looked at those, when I reviewed them, the same broad commercial language was in those overlays, but then it prohibited a number of uses. So we mimicked that. We added to the prohibited uses so that we could keep it broad enough that it would create the ability to be creative and to allow us to possibly include uses that we may not think of today or may not exist today. But then making sure that we're honing back on that and not just opening it up for everything by including and expanding the prohibited use list. So that's how we addressed that comment from the last meeting. Commercial sub areas, that's the same thing that we just discussed. We left that broad, but then expanded the prohibited uses. And then we added some additional exhibits to help illustrate how various lots could be developed utilizing the proposed standards. We included an internal lot that fronted on 23 and a corner lot that fronted on 23 to try to show how those could be developed. Advanced manufacturing and logistics, research and development, there's no major changes that are proposed. Multifamily, we heard at the last meeting that density was a concern. So we reduced the density from the proposed 10 acres to 8 acres, and then we added density bonuses in. So they can still get back up to the 10 units per acre, but they have to provide amenities in order to get those additional units. So that's how we addressed the density concerns. In the mixed use subarea, we made some changes to the permitted uses by deleting the single family that we just discussed and added home occupations. It came up at the last meeting that the home occupation standards in the current code, which was what was being referenced, really weren't conducive to the work at home environment that we're experiencing today. So we've put language in there allowing home occupations to be permissive if they're not changing the character of the neighborhood, they're no more than 20% of the livable area, there's no outside employees. So somebody that's working an office job that just wants to set up their computer in their home can do that without jumping through a number of hoops. So it's very typical of what we see around communities around Ohio. Mix of uses, we adjusted the mix of uses because we eliminated the single family component. So now that only addresses the multifamily and the mixed use areas and showing what those types of mixtures must be in each of the mixed use areas. And then we added an additional drawing to show how a mixed use development could be laid out with townhomes, mixed use buildings, with the central green space that's required, and showing how that can all meet the standards. The next big thing that we changed are the architectural requirements. We received a lot of comments at the last meeting, mostly about the use of newer materials, and there was a lot of discussion about that. So the way that I've addressed this is that I defined a newer material as anything that does not exist as of the adoption date of the overlay district. So what the purpose of newer materials is some technology may come along in the future that allows the manufacturing of materials that look like natural materials. Doesn't exist today if we haven't listed it, but it may exist in the future. So if there is something that meets the intent, looks like a natural material that's permitted, but is manufactured, it gives the trustees the ability to approve that if it's something of a newer technology after the adoption date of the overlay district. And then we made some other minor modifications to the architectural requirements to help clarify some of the text and concerns that we received. In the landscaping section, we increased the height of the parking lot screening to 36 inches. That was previously 30 inches. One of the written comments we received wanted it at 36. Parking, there's no major changes. However, I will say that Michelle reached out to a couple developers since the second draft went out, and there was one comment that came back from them regarding the residential parking areas, that the maximum parking for those may not be enough to meet the demands for residential units. So we're looking into that and possibly need to make changes to that for the next draft. Access and connectivities, there's no major changes. Lighting, we had a height requirement for the lights that was not consistent with what the township currently requires. So we changed that to 20 feet to remain consistent with the township's current practices. Signs, we've done a number of different things with that. We talked about murals last time. We talked about how murals could be an artistic way to really brighten up a mixed use area. So we decided that we wanted to allow murals, but it had an issue. We had an issue with a permit being required because of it possibly being content based. So we took out the permit requirements to avoid that legal issue. We clarified that the maximum sign area is 36 square feet for the monument signs per sign face. There was concern last time that it read that that was for the whole sign. So we made sure that it was per sign face. We added language to the temporary sign section to allow the zoning inspector to grant a one-time 90-day extension for large temporary signs. The way it's currently written is that they can get 3 30-day permits. But there was concern from Jeff, who does the sign permits for the township, that some of these larger temporary signs for developments are out there for 6 months. So this would give another 190-day extension that would end up giving them the full 6 months. And then anything above and beyond that would have to be approved through the development plan. And then we added additional restrictions to the electronic message displays. Again, those are written in a way that they will only apply to the gas station signs by regulating the size of them. And then we added language regarding the regulation of the luminance levels, and then also requiring them to be turned off after business hours. In the utilities section, we encouraged regional detention. That was something that regional planning wanted us to include, and also compliance with the OEPA's OLNTNG permit. Accessory structures, we just removed the areas referring to single family uses, both for accessory structures and fences. I already talked about home occupations. In the definition section, we added a definition for auto-oriented uses. This is something that we referred to as being prohibited within the mixed use area, but there was no definition for what the auto-oriented uses were. And this includes drive-throughs and those sorts of things, because we want it to be a walkable community. We also removed any definitions that applied to single family uses. We added a definition for home occupation, and we defined a townhome. So those are a broad overview of the changes that we've made, and I will open it up for questions.
You want questions, or do you want to kind of go through comments again? Same sort of thing. The self-storage units that were removed, are those removed from all of the 23 overlay, or am I missing that it's just one of the areas?
The prohibited uses apply to all of the sub areas within the 23 overlay. But again, if they don't pull down the cloud and they're in the underlying district allows it, then they would continue to be allowed under the underlying district.
Okay.
So basically, if it's allowed under current zoning, it's allowed, is what you're saying?
As long as they're not pulling down the cloud.
Okay.
Are we calling the cloud this overlay? I'm confused.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. The cloud's the overlay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So a developer or a property owner has a choice of to use what the existing zoning is or to use the overlay.
Correct.
Correct?
Once they use the overlay, though, the existing zoning goes away.
It no longer applies. Okay.
Yeah.
While we're talking, I had a comment about self-service storage facilities. Other jurisdictions also include RV and boat storage facilities as part of the outdoor storage facilities. We don't have anything, it looks like, in this prohibiting if I want RV or boat storage off of 23. Am I reading this correct?
I think that would be exterior storage, I think is not allowed.
Yeah, outdoor storage of,
That's of inoperable, unlicensed, or unused vehicles.
we can clarify that. If you want to make sure that those are prohibited, we can make sure that we clarify that.
I'm just bringing that up because I know besides storage facilities, because we are close to Alum Creek, there are also storage facilities for people with RVs and boats. Some of them are restricted in areas, some are not in areas. My personal preference would be that they would be restricted. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. I'll just throw that out there because it does not seem to be included in this current document.
I personally don't have a problem depending on where they go with, the toy box that was approved, which is all interior storage, and the orange storage place on 23. But again, there's no exterior storage allowed at either one of those locations.
Exactly. And then the toy box was done as a condo, not as a storage facility. It was one of the uses people could.
Right.
The condo.
Well,
Correct.
I think boats could be stored. It just can't be parked in front of the
Correct.
building line. So
Exactly. I mean, I have no problem if it's in a garage. I have a problem with if it's just shrink wrapped lying outside, or if it's an RV lying outside. But then you've also, it looks like, established self-storage facilities are prohibited as well. So.
And that was added based upon the comments at the last meeting. So that was not in the first draft.
Okay.
And when it came up that we were too broad, that was one of the uses that was a concern, and that the existing PUDs prohibited. So we added that in.
Okay. Which. Personally, I don't have a problem restricting self-storage storage facilities. I believe in our current code they're allowed, but they're zoned industrial.
yeah,
I have no problem.
yeah.
Like I said, I have no problem if they're along the railroad tracks. I do have a problem if they're along 23.
Yeah. Industrial is where they should be.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how to craft that into this document, I don't know.
Well, I can do that if you're okay with self-storage and storage units in the industrial area along the railroad.
Mhm.
I'm able to move that to that area, and once I move it to that area, then it's only permitted in that sub area.
Yeah, and I have no problem if they also have RVs and boats, as long as they're sort of enclosed, not
Okay.
necessarily like a bunch of, RVs all lined up like it's a school bus yard.
Yeah, and I'm going to look real quickly at the manufacturing.
So I'm just sorry, but since Todd, since you brought it up, I thought I would.
Oh, no, that's fine.
In fact, the permitted uses in the advanced manufacturing district are required to be within an enclosed building. So
Okay.
if I move the storage to there, then there would be no outside storage allowed.
Good.
Good.
I
All right.
prefer it that way.
Everybody agree to that then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we talked earlier about the multifamily. You said the density is from 10 acres to 8 acres. I'm assuming that's units per acre.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Michelle, when we have these meetings that are going to the trustees now, will we still have a zoning sign go on the property announcing it?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want it, we can't write anything in the text, but I think that would be helpful since we're only informing the people that are adjacent to the property. Which I'm assuming that means if they have property that's touching the boundary, that they get informed.
Well, I think it's still the 200 feet, right? Too,
I don't think
Holly?
that's the way it's written.
The notification,
Yeah,
it follows the Ohio Revised Code, which is the adjacent properties and across the street.
so it's not 200 feet.
I did not write 200 feet and
Yeah.
I followed the Ohio Revised Code.
So I would hope we could get signage to inform the public.
Is-
Um,
Can we do the 200 feet, or I mean, are we not? I thought for some reason I thought that was part of the revised code, but
No, the Revised Code says all adjoining properties and across the street.
okay.
So if I have a property that is less than 200 feet from the property that's potentially going to be rezoned or under this new overlay district, if I'm not directly, if we don't have like an adjoining property line, or if I'm not directly across the street, I won't know about it.
correct.
The way this is written, you would not be notified by mail.
Okay,
That's why I'm asking for the sign.
okay.
So,
And- The other question I have, I am the property owner, I get notified. Do I get invited? Do I go to the pre-application meeting? How do I find out what's happening next door to me?
So the notification would be of the trustees meeting.
Okay, so I don't know what's gonna happen until it goes to the trustees.
Correct. That is the official process. The official application is when it goes to the trustees.
Okay, so, the developer, new property owner doesn't even have to have like a preliminary discussion with me of what's happening next door.
They are not required to have any discussion with the neighbors. In my practice of 20 years in the planning world, we have always encouraged developers to have neighborhood meetings.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because we have also always encouraged to have neighborhood meetings just to avoid complications at a zoning meeting.
Yes.
But it sounds like now potentially this could go before the trustees and all of a sudden neighbors could come out of the woodwork is what you're saying.
Well, I still think that that encouragement would still happen. I mean, I don't think you have anything in your current code that requires them to meet with the adjoining neighbors. It's encouraged, and I think that would still be what Michelle and staff would encourage that to happen. And I think most developers these days tend to do that to protect themselves and to get people more on board and more comfortable with it before they go in front of these public boards.
but it's usually if they're not meeting our code. If a developer comes in with a strip center that's adjoining someone's property, but it meets our code, I bet they don't meet with the neighbors. Because there's no pushback. I mean, there's nothing that the trustees are going to say, well, you don't meet X, Y, and Z. What do the neighbors think? It's, well, it meets our code. So therefore, it meets our code.
Well,
Correct?
well, if it does meet the code, I think that the trustees are hard pushed, would be hard not for them not to approve it.
Right.
Correct.
Page 41, accessory structures, the very first sentence. I don't know. I don't understand it. Accessory structures for all uses except for those on individual
I think there's a typo there. I saw
Okay.
that today.
Okay,
Let me get there and I
individual
will,
something.
yeah, it's a typo.
Okay. And then on the maps, this second map, I guess it is, along Lewis Center. I'm assuming, and I appreciate it, that we're removing the residential multifamily along Lewis Center Road.
Yes,
So that's not part of the district.
that's correct. It
And
will be
then if-
shown as white now.
Okay, so if we could,
Well, just this part.
So
I'm sorry, yes.
just the part that was just approved.
oh, not the whole stretch?
Not the whole stretch, just that red area there.
Okay,
Is,
that's what I was confused about. Thank you.
and there's no talk about removing that?
The whole strip,
Yep.
we've had conversations on our team level and
So
the thought is to keep that in there,
So
except for the part that's.
developers, right?
No, internal Orange Township, Delaware County team.
I mean, the zoning commission can do a stipulation, you know, even if we don't adjust the maps. I mean, would you, we could,
I'd like to see that not part of the corridor. And I'd like to see the make part of MU2, which is adjacent, not part of the corridor.
okay.
I haven't thought completely one way or the other whether or not they should be part of the corridor. Having them part of the corridor flags certain stipulations in the corridor that concern me. And I don't know if you.
I just would be very, very, very upset if I just built an Epcon house and did my research and everyone around me I thought was going to be single family residential, and here it comes.
Well, that is also sort of my comment as well, is that not only for, like you said, the people who just bought a house, but also some of these residential, single family residential communities that are abutting the overlay has me concerned, because we've reduced the 100-foot buffer that we used to have between residential and other uses has been substantially reduced. So if I'm an existing property owner, or like Todd said, I just spent, over $500,000 on an Epcon home, and all of a sudden I find out that I can get a mixed use building within 50 feet of my backyard. If I'm reading this text correctly, is that the case, or am I misreading the text?
The Epcon is where it says remove from this district, correct?
Right.
Correct. But all those right now, all those properties for the most part are single family residential, unless I'm mistaken, Michelle. A lot of them are like old ranch houses on rather large lots.
Those are all farm residential.
Yep.
So they're,
And then there's that little area with the stem street that we heard from, that I don't know what that exactly, the one that's just highlighted. So, I mean, that was one of the comments I had when I read through the text, that some of these adjacencies between existing single family residential and these uses in the overlay don't correspond with our current zoning, which is fine, except if I bought a house, or if I have one of those properties and all of a sudden commercial next door, the setback's 25 feet from my home when it used to be 100.
It would not be any closer than 50 feet. All of the sub areas require 50 feet if there's an abutting residential district. But I get what you're saying, that it's currently 100, so it would be reduced, but it would not be 25 feet, it would be 50 feet.
yeah, and then this area, the MU2, are make part of it. we purposely didn't add these on here. So it would even have a larger buffer from,
I just hate surrounding our town of Lewis Center with Evans Farm across the street, multifamily, and then multi-use. I mean, right now we have that make part of MU2. Wasn't that part of the home road extension that was all going to be single family?
it is that still, yes.
Yeah. So my comment would be to get rid of the multifamily and then to make part of MU2 and not have that as part of this corridor. I think we have enough in this corridor right now.
I think that what we need to do is what Michelle recommended and have that be a stipulation when the zoning commission makes its recommendation to the trustees.
Mhm. Is there any other comments you had on the maps?
I guess the only other thing was that the map 4 will then need to reflect the map 3. So if we're only removing from the
Yeah.
district, we want to do it on 4 as well, which might just be
Yep.
formatting. I still don't like some of the building heights. And the only comment on the murals is what are we making sure that it's not a billboard?
And that, I believe, is a comment that Jeff Baird just made to us today. Maybe that we can tie it to, the mural has to be tied to the business on site in some way. Otherwise, it would be considered an off-premise sign, and then that helps you with your billboard comment.
But if it's tied to Verizon and Verizon does a mural and it's a big old Verizon mural, isn't that a billboard?
That was my next question, is when does it no longer become a mural and become a sign?
I think it's going to be very difficult to regulate.
No.
Originally, we had murals as being prohibited for that reason. It was a recommendation coming out of regional planning to include them because they could be cool in a mixed use area. I don't want murals to hang up this overlay district. I would recommend just making them prohibited if that's going to be a huge issue. I'd rather just move forward and not focus on that.
I mean, I think murals could be cool as well. But like I said, at what point is it no longer a mural, or does it become a sign? Or what if it's a mural that people object politically to?
Yeah. And with the hands being tied on content based, with the township having their hands tied to that, you're gonna be very limited on what you can and cannot regulate. So you're probably better off just saying prohibited.
The issue here, this is Jeff, with the murals, one of the big issues relating to signage with it is people are saying it's considered art and not considered signage. So there are some differences in courts. Some courts say it counts as signs, some courts say it doesn't. So I mean, that's just kind of a could be a catch-22. We either prohibit it and then we go to court because somebody says, well, it's deemed art, so then they're going to take us to court for it, or we allow it and then people say it's signage. I mean, I could definitely do some more research on some of the restrictions on it. I know Gilbert, Arizona has it in their code and has some restrictions on it. And they had a big content legal battle. So, I mean, I can look into it more if that's something.
Tell you what,
want us to.
this is what my opinion is that it's so minor to what we're trying to do with this overlay district is let's not talk about murals at all. Let's not say they're prohibited. Let's not say they're permitted. Let's just stay silent on it and address that issue if and when it comes up. You guys can decide at that time how to regulate it, if you want to regulate it, but I wouldn't spend hours researching something that we're not sure is even going to be an issue, and something that I don't want to hold up this overlay district.
Just know people will try to push the envelope.
I couldn't hear you.
I just know people will try to push the envelope.
Have you ever had murals come up in the past?
No. But
No.
as soon as we say we're going to do a mural, we might have Mount Carmel in here doing a emergency room mural on the side of their building.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. If we don't even
silent,
mention murals in the text, the chances of it coming up, since it hasn't come up yet, are probably pretty slim.
So yeah, I mean, if you're fine removing it,
Yeah,
and then
I'm
if,
fine.
and then if someone wants them, they can then go through a process and try to get one on the side of the building, correct?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, remove
Okay.
it. At least that's my 2 cents.
That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Okay.
Those are all my initial comments.
Okay.
I just have a few. So, going back to the newer material comment under the materials. So, just for clarification purposes, because the way I read it, and I just want to clarify it, that if a said material, I guess would not fall under what we're specifying in here, cultured stone, stucco, wood, brick, or stone, and some newer technology came out, it still has to go through a review, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. All right. And then regarding the home occupation, I just want to clarify that too, because the way I read it, I get what you're saying about working from home and stuff, but is this then allowing individuals within their residence to run a business out of it, to where there's people coming, customers, whatever? And is that essentially what that's saying?
It's basically allowing office type uses. So it's typically when there's customers coming to and from, that's when you start saying it's changing the character of the neighborhood and would not be permitted.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely that you're going to have like a huge impact from a home occupation the way that this is written.
Yeah, I know. And that's what I didn't want to open the door to, people now running businesses out of their homes, where opposed to, me working in my basement doesn't necessarily make my home a office. I mean, it's not, it's not office use. I reside here, but I'm working from home.
Right.
I just don't want it to, I just want to make sure that it was clarified. I don't want it to turn into a certain percentage of residents are allowed to run an office out of their residence, I guess, if that's.
I'm thinking between the 20% requirement and the not allowing to change the appearance of it. And I think there was not allowed to be any additional parking or traffic or visitors. So someone couldn't do a hair salon in their basement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And in the definition, it talks about financial planners, real estate agents, consultants, lawyers, architects, engineers, accountants, professional services.
Yeah.
Those sorts of home occupations.
Can you have them? I can't remember. Can you have an employee?
You cannot have an employee
unless
they are a resident of the house. So like, for example, I work out of my home with my consulting business. If I hired my child, they would be allowed because they live here.
Sure. Okay.
So then the last comment, which is kind of a bigger one, and this is going back to the very beginning. I don't know what if any risk would be associated with this, but I feel like I would be more comfortable that if the zoning inspector during the initial stage of review, can make the determination that if it should just go straight to the trustees or still go through the zoning board. I mean, they can, it doesn't change the process. It just allows, it doesn't take zoning completely out of it. If there was, say, an extremely complicated, maybe someone's asking for, these major modifications, and applicants, bending a lot of what was already written in this content, in this text, and they wanted to make these changes, I would feel more comfortable if it was still an option to, have, after that's been reviewed, kicked over to zoning to go through a more thorough process and review than just directly to the trustees. And I'm not saying that, that's every application, and it may only be one or two total, or maybe never at all. But I just feel like if we still had, and I don't know if the rest of the board agrees or not on that, but I feel like that if we still had that as an option, the zoning inspector would make that call and then determine if it just goes directly to the trustees or not.
I've had major concerns from the get-go that the zoning, I mean, we changed the whole minor major modification because of a certain development that was approved as a minor modification by the trustees and set a precedence, and we've fought it for years. So I personally am not sure, other than they feel they can speed the process along, of why the trustees want to get into the zoning. I mean, we all know what we put into these applications for review and discussion, and are they just going to have a 1 hour meeting and open it up to the public that shows up? Or, I mean, are they going to really dive into what these applications are? So I just have major concern that there's no involvement from the commission.
Yeah, Todd, I think that's the balance here is what I think I'm at least suggesting is, we don't entirely eliminate zoning altogether. I think that if it's something that is going to be a very complicated, project, that the zoning inspector then has the ability to make the call that, okay, this is not something that should go directly to the trustees. I feel like this should go through zoning, to review X, Y, and Z of this project, and then it goes to the trustees after that. And I get this process, and I agree with it 100% that, this will allow for a much faster process and would be good all around for Orange Township and everybody. But I think that, just adding or leaving in there that there is still an option to run specific projects through zoning, I don't see really how that would prohibit or go against what is trying to be achieved here.
And we can say it's one meeting. I mean, if we're worried about, the process and the time, and the trustees want to get it, approved in 30 days, give us one crack at it in one meeting, and we can come up with comments in that one meeting and send it off with, this is zoning's concerns, or this is, they totally agree with this application.
Because right now, it seems to me that it's going directly to the trustees to make zoning decisions. That the zoning inspector, and that is sort of, they're a professional, isn't making any determination. The zoning commission isn't making any determination. It's going straight to the trustees, the way I understand this process right now. And, I had some questions about what was considered a major or minor modification. I know you discussed that earlier on. But yeah, if the zoning department can, make a determination, yes, this is minor, it can go straight to the trustees, or this might have some red flags, it needs to be discussed, I also would feel more comfortable. I understand that we're trying to streamline the process, that we're trying to encourage development. I know the township needs more office and other types of development. But by the same token, in the past, decisions have been made that we're still dealing with by the trustees in terms of zoning.
I think, and I've raised this in the past as well, that Michelle has done a phenomenal job and is very professional in her work. And I think that this document provides her the ability to continue to play that advisory role to the trustees. And I think that that's where you guys are going to have to lay your trust in her to identify what should or should not be approved as a modification and provide that recommendation to the trustees.
But even that, we still have no input. Because we've even taken the minor and major modification out of it now. It all just goes back to the trustees.
Yeah, I mean, Holly, I don't want, this process does not work if zoning is looking at every single applicant that's in this overlay district. This doesn't function. There's no purpose of doing it. I'm only asking, and if you have an opinion that, well, that could do this or that, and then I'd love to hear it, but I'm only asking that we just still leave in not what we had exactly before with major and minor modifications, but we leave in the part that the zoning inspector can make the call if an application needs to go through zoning prior to going to the trustees. And if we want to put in there that it's one meeting or one review or whatever, I'm comfortable with that. I just feel that it should still be an option if needed, not on every single application, not every single one we see, because someone wants to put in a material or something and it's very small change, that I'm good with that going straight to the trustees. I think that we're probably going to see a lot more of those than we are going to see someone going in here and almost trying to change, half of this stuff. But in the case of a very complicated applicant, I just feel like and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, I just feel like it would be helpful for everybody to have an option to send it to zoning if the zoning inspector would determine that that was a feasible solution at that time, I guess. So
I guess all I can offer at this point in time is to say that we'll take that into consideration and talk internally as a team, understanding your concerns and also weighing the legal opinion that we've received and just come back to you at the next meeting with how we plan to proceed. I don't know if I can agree to anything tonight. I just need to have conversations with the whole team regarding this.
okay.
So basically it's up for further discussion is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I just have to go back and talk to the team. I don't know where we're going to land given the legal opinion that we have.
Yeah, I'll agree with Holly. This is Michelle. I think we can maybe try to either talk to legal or revisit the team and see if there's another option for involvement.
I mean, I was just curious because when I was reviewing this document, I did have comments upon how to determine what's a major modification versus a minor modification. What some people might think is minor, other people will think is major. I know you've tried to outline that, then we've done away with it. I guess, yeah, it just seems that there's, it's open to a lot of potential issues for me.
Yeah, and I think going back and forth between having a major versus minor modification, it does make it tricky to identify that it's at times, and we will have situations that it's kind of in the middle. And we thought getting rid of that out completely was a better move if it were to still only go to the trustees. But yeah, I think as Holly says, I don't know if we have an answer for this today, but we definitely can revisit it and talk further on it.
That's fine. Just take it into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that being, even if it's Michelle or somebody else like on staff that says, yeah, I think that this might need to go through zoning, and maybe that never happens. It's just an option.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite content for it to go through staff. Trust me, I don't want to, come to all these meetings unless absolutely positively necessary. Um, Sorry, guys. And that, you know, like Adam said, one move, one meeting. If it's considered something substantial, Michelle or whoever's on staff says maybe they should take a look at it. We give our 2 cents, end of story.
Okay.
Okay.
And I would think that could even be established at that pre-meeting, couldn't it be?
Only if we're invited to attend the pre-meeting.
Well, it's gonna say shall.
Okay. That is definite. Okay,
Well, but that's only 2 members,
Right.
right?
that's fine.
But during that discussion with you, Michelle, and
Yeah.
the a trustee or whoever's involved and the applicant, you or zoning or trustees could say, hey, I think this is a bit more than we thought it was going to be. Maybe we should just, instead of coming to the trustees this meeting, you're going to go to the zoning for one meeting.
And
just
unless
to-
I'm mistaken, the current pre-meetings are limited to 2 people anyway. So it's not an official meeting.
Correct.
So
Right.
it's not a change from our current practice of pre-meetings with potential
Correct.
developers.
Correct.
And that's where we usually do encourage them to talk to neighboring property owners if they have not already, to make sure that there's no issues at the last minute.
Well, why don't we take these comments into consideration and we'll report back to you at the next meeting.
That is fine. I have some comments or questions. I don't know if Adam and Todd, if you have completed your list of stuff. I don't want to.
No, I'm good. I'm all
good.
done. That was it. Yeah.
It's all you.
All right. And again, this is because I haven't been involved in the past, so I apologize. You probably have already gone over some of this stuff, and I'm just not familiar with it. One of the issues that we just discussed, so I'm not going to bring that up, was with the major minor and how to figure all that out. I brought up the abutting single family residential, but we've removed those portions, so I feel more comfortable with that. I did have concerns because of what the current versus the change of 100 to 50 might impact residents who have already purchased their property. So if you're good with that, that's fine. I did have one question, and I couldn't find it in the definition section, because I know where you have these multifamily stub areas or these mixed use, you keep using the term condominium. And I was wondering, what do you mean by condominium? Because I have always understood that condominium is a form of land ownership. It's not a building type. You can have an office condominium. You can have, a flat that's a condominium. You can have a townhouse, a duplex. You can have a single family home that's a condominium. So it doesn't, for me, it opens a whole can of worms when you're using the term condominium in what's supposed to be a multifamily complex.
Now, it's a very good point. I'm going to refer to everything as multifamily units or townhomes, because you are correct. Condominium is a type of land ownership.
Okay, so that was just me, because we've had like office condominiums or something like that. So when you mean condominium, you actually mean a multifamily residential unit.
Yes,
Okay.
I do. Yes.
So, I mean, or if you could just define it, but make sure that that's what you mean, because
Yep.
if not, it's open to interpretation.
Yep. No, very good point. Thank you.
So that was just one that sort of raised a flag for me. I know when underneath your multifamily sub areas, I think there are still a few references to single family that you might want to go through and remove. So I would just look at that.
I will check that.
Okay, I noticed that. And I guess it's area sub thing 3. You still use that term. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling through that. I did have, like Todd, a little concerned about the height. I'm less worried about it now that you've removed that the current existing single family out of this sort of overlay. I wouldn't want, like Todd said, someone who just spent like $500,000 on an EPCON house to have a 60-foot or 50-foot or whatever building right next to their house. So I'm a little more comfortable with that, but that is a concern. I'll just throw it out there. I don't know how the other commission members feel, but those heights don't bother me as much if it's multifamily, but it does bother me if it's abutting single family residential uses, because they've purchased their property with the understanding of what will be next to them, and that might change. So I'll just throw that out there. I noticed in one of your charts, you have this statement saying tract boundary setback when abutting a designated residential area. What do you mean by a designated residential area? Is that like a multifamily area? Or yeah, what's a or is it a mixed use area with the portion of that mixed use being residential?
Michelle and I talked about that today, and I'm going to change that language to a designated single family or farm residential use.
Okay, so that's basically the area we're talking about, where we talked about earlier, like by Lewis Center Road, where we have some of those existing
residential.
Okay,
Yep.
I just didn't know what you meant by designated. I assumed that you had discussed it, and that was just something that, you know, wasn't for me, that I wasn't around for that.
Yep. We just talked about that today.
Okay. I did have one comment when you were sort of laying out your sort of developments, and you were talking about where the central green space would go. And I was wondering why you have parking off of your central green space as opposed to, like, you know, building, parking in the middle, and then another building.
And that goes back to wanting to create the streetscape and making sure that the buildings are facing the street with the parking in the back.
Okay.
So that's why it's like that.
Okay.
The only other option is to create two smaller green areas where the parking is and to put the parking in the middle. But I don't think you want to eliminate the buildings or move the buildings from the street right away and mess up that streetscape.
See, I guess I think that the central green space, and this is just me as like a designer, so I'll just put would have more of an impact on the development if I was in a building, or if I was in a mixed use or whatever office building, or even residential, and I was overlooking the green space as opposed to the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I could move a couple of the buildings around to face the green spaces and move the parking in between the buildings so that
I was getting at.
I'm sorry.
That's what I was getting at. And I know I can't put anything on your screen, but
all right, I can do that.
I have 2 rows of building, parking in the middle.
Yep.
Just a suggestion. I don't know how people of the board feel about it, but having parking off of your central green sort of lessens the impact of the central green of why you have.
I get it. Yeah.
I like that idea too.
Okay. You know, that's why you have a central green, and, you know, that's why people will be more likely to want to lease or purchase or whatever buildings on the central green, because people would rather look at green than parking, see if parking.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense.
Okay, that was, let's see what else I had. I did have a question about building materials, and I know you touched upon new materials, which is one of the things I had a question about. And, you know, I understand we have new technology coming out in terms of synthetic materials that are developed all the time. But I did have a question, and I don't know if how this had been discussed. When you're talking about the predominant building materials, and I think this is for commercial, office, multifamily, and mixed use buildings, you're suggesting that 80% of the exterior walls of the building be natural materials such as brick, stone, cultured stone, I'm assuming cast stone, stucco, or wood. To be honest, I work in architecture. I don't know any, and I do mixed use and multifamily. Nobody uses wood on an exterior because of the maintenance issue. They use
Nobody
wood,
uses what?
wood
Okay.
exterior because of the maintenance issues generally.
Okay.
Generally, you're going to use like fiber cement. It will look like wood, but it'll be fiber cement. So I was wondering if you had talked to developers about this, of what they were using, because I mean, some developers even use vinyl, and I try to convince them not to use vinyl because that also has maintenance issues. But, and why stucco and not like ephes, which is used a lot? And then the other question is where the 80% number comes from, because I'm assuming you're referring to all sides of the building,
Yes.
exterior faces. Whereas some buildings that I've done in the short north, the side facing High Street might be predominantly brick or stone with a little bit of ephes or stucco, but the back might have only the ground floor be cast stone or brick or something like that, and the upper floors might be ephes or fiber cement or something like that. So I was wondering if where that 80% and whether or not current practice has commented on that. And Todd, I don't know, or Adam, I don't know what areas you predominantly work in. I'm assuming, I think Todd, you said commercial, but what is really used in building practice?
I thought we've always kind of stressed the 75%, and we've always stressed four-sided architecture.
Yes.
So, you know.
But we haven't stressed necessarily wood or whatever, but it is.
No, and you know, the Schottensteins group didn't. I don't think they liked the fiber cement or whatever.
Yeah, they didn't like the fiber cement.
We'd
They
asked
wanted
for.
vinyl, and that was my next question.
Yeah.
You have vinyl as being an equal to fiber cement, which is only the case is if you use a heavy mill, heavy duty vinyl, as opposed to a cheap vinyl, which is what the issue we had with the Schottenstein is. They wanted to use a cheaper vinyl, which will warp, or if it's like a hot day, it'll look like it's melting or warping. That's the also one, if you have like a hailstorm or a baseball, it's going to dent the side of your vinyl. I don't think that's what you want.
Yeah, Christine, I think the way to fix this is if we were just to keep as you listed those materials. I mean, wood is perfectly fine if someone wants to use it, but I think we could add fiber cement. Mm-hmm. You know, whether we call that plank or board or whatever, just fiber cement as a material that is approved. You know, we can't specifically say like hardy plank or something because that's a manufacturer, but
proprietary. But fiber cement or
yeah. And then I think whether we add language to say four-sided architecture or whatever, I think would just take care of both of those. You know,
I believe.
Well, the four-sided architecture is there. It's up at the beginning,
right?
Because it applies to all of the buildings. And it says buildings and also barriers shall be designed to be seen from 360 degrees and have the same caliber of finish on all elevations.
Which is what we've adopted in the past. We've had to twink that definition over the years of what four-sided architecture meant. I think you've done a good job of that by saying that you need to have, you know, some sort of feature on each wall. You can't just have a blank wall with one door, that you need, you know, windows, gables, porticos, whatever. So that is good. I was just wondering, you know, what the feedback was in terms of current building practice on your predominant materials.
I think some of these things are a little more open-ended than our original code. You know, it drove Mike McCarthy crazy. He would change that sentence, not such as brick, but including or only, or, you know, something that, so now someone can come in and say, well, it's a natural material. Well, it's not our list. Well, it's kind of like brick, you know, so it leaves a little more open, but we're calling it natural material.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I would, that was just a comment. And then below where you have accent, you have, I call it fiber cement, cementitious siding. Drive-It is actually a proprietary name for EFS, so I would use EFS.
Okay.
That's just my 2 cents, Todd.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
chime in there.
Yeah.
There are other EFS manufacturers. I by no means am going to say which one is the best,
Sure.
but just call it EFS so we don't deal with like the hardy versus other types.
Yeah.
If you catch my drift.
Okay. So am I hearing, I want to make sure I heard correctly that everybody agreed to add the fibrous cement to the predominant material list?
I have no problems with
I have
it.
no problem with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Christine, I think you're right. Maybe we call that cementitious board or something.
Yeah.
So
Siding.
down and below, I call it cementous siding. You want me to
Siding.
stick with that
Yep.
term?
Siding.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, I think fiber cement, cementitious siding, it's, the only issue with cementitious siding is that is really siding, like lap siding, as opposed to board and batten or shingle or something else that people
Yeah.
can sometimes use. So fiber cement covers all types of potential sheathing. Does that make sense? If you want board and batten, or if you want shingle, or if you want, you know, vertical siding as opposed to horizontal siding or whatever. There's a matter of scale, I guess, or terminology. Cementitious siding implies just siding, not board and batten or shingles.
Oh, I guarantee you they'll come in and say it's siding.
I'm just saying, I go over this all the time with the developers I work
Oh,
with.
I know. Yeah.
And again, where we're talking about the accent materials, I know you have vinyl and aluminum. There is very popular now forms of aluminum trim, or not aluminum, sorry, vinyl trim, or composite trim that's being used. I don't know, Todd, if you want to chime in on AZAC or LP Smart side, that is also being used because it provides advantages over fiber cement in terms of you can put directly against concrete. So I don't know if you want to include those or not, or if I'm just getting too technical.
No, I think this is great feedback. I appreciate it. What's the board's thought on that?
I'm trying to think of a vinyl. The only thing is I don't want to open the door for them to say, oh, this is a vinyl trim. And it's, you know, because I'm trying to think of like a product that I've seen that's, you know, I'd rather leave it, you know, if they want to use something like that, that it should go through the review, not something that's in here and they just say.
I mean, the problem with vinyl is you could have something like AZAC, which I've used before on projects where fiber cement was an issue.
Yes.
And you couldn't use fiber cement because of being adjacent to like the ground plane or, you know, a concrete or a roof or something like that. They had to raise it above because of the potential water issues. We've used AZAC or vinyl siding or vinyl trim, but it opens a whole can of worms of the definition of
Yes.
what is that vinyl trim. So if you're uncomfortable with that, I understand completely.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I think we just leave that out, and whatever product they're using that's vinyl related, they have to write that in as a divergence or something to go under review.
Okay. So, and then and again, it's a material thing when we came to townhomes or townhouses. And you have exterior material cladding listed and you have fiber cement, whatever term you use, be consistent with it. You'll have vinyl beaded siding or any material of equal quality as well. I don't know how to word it to make sure that the vinyl siding is of the same quality as wood or fiber cement siding, so you don't have issues with the vinyl siding sagging or getting marked in a hailstorm or things of that nature. This was the problem we had with Schottenstein, where we wanted them to use a higher quality vinyl siding to prevent that type of damage to the siding, which would impact neighboring property values and things of that nature. So I don't know if anybody has any idea, or if you think any material of equal quality will cover it, or do we need to specify a thickness or something like that?
I'd put the mill in.
If you put the mill in, then I'd have to do research to determine which mill is of equal to fiber cement. But you understand what I'm saying, Todd?
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's a whole range of vinyl siding.
Oh, sure.
From
I mean, it's been years, but when I worked in Dublin, we did do a mill for the siding, and I'd have to go back and see what it was.
Mhm.
But I could look into that for you.
All right. So I'm just throwing that out there to make sure it's of equal quality. Because I doubt that that's something that the trustees are familiar with.
Right.
And that's one reason why I'm a little nervous of just giving it, all over to the trustees without some of these adjustments or without some form of review. Because we have had developers that have tried to use cheaper siding because they want to save money, but it does impact the quality of the development.
Okay.
So
I'll look into that a little bit.
Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. And I'm at a slight, I work in multifamily and mixed use. So these are some of the issues I have to deal with my client. And sometimes they do the cheap siding, I'll be honest, regardless of our recommendation, because it comes down to cost. And I think I just had one or two last comments, and it has to do with landscaping. I understand why you put in how should I put it? I guess there's two issues. One I had was the screening areas that shall consist of either landscaping or walls accented with landscaping. But that's a very broad with service area, production areas, storage area, trash containers, and loading zones. And we've had issues in the past in the township where they've had sort of trash containers and storage areas, which they haven't really screened. I believe our current code requires that trash containers or trash enclosures be solid on 3 sides, and then you have the gate on the 4th side, because we have had problems in the past with improperly screened areas. So I wasn't sure if it's something that you all had talked about of maybe dividing them. I mean, I understand the loading area, you can't put a fence around. I understand certain service areas or production areas, you can't put a fence around. However, I think a storage area, depending upon its size, but definitely trash containers, you should put a fence around, and potentially landscaping as well. We had a big issue with the Walmart that had a storage area that they had a fence around, but it was not an appropriate fence that they have since gone back and remedied. I don't know, Todd or Adam or, Michelle, if you want to chime in what I'm talking about. What I don't want, I guess, is I don't want to be living in a multifamily complex and have the dumpster for the office next to me not screened, or have the dumpster for the restaurant that's down below me on the mixed use building not screened. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Or be screened with landscaping that's dying and you can't see.
Right.
Basically, yes. Or be screened with something that in the wintertime doesn't provide any coverage.
It's usually 3 sides with like material of the building, and then the
And then
the gates.
Yeah, and then the 4th side's the gate. I mean, I know they need a gate. And I also wanted to mention storage area because that's what the Walmart had. They had a storage area that was basically a chain link fence with trash inside of it. It wasn't very attractive. And eventually it was modified so that the people down the street, or every time you drove by it on a public street, or, actually, I'm not sure if that alleyway was a public street or just an alleyway, but it was a heavily utilized area that people were driving by. Nobody wants to drive by and see a trash dump.
Yep.
So if you
I
want
think we can address that.
yeah, if you want to tweak the wording however you think best, that is fine.
Yep.
And I know you've prohibited the use of mulch in landscape islands, and I understand what you're going for. You just don't want a landscape island that's like dead with nothing on it but a bunch of mulch.
And
That
that has also
was-
come up as a comment from the fire department. They don't want mulch for fire purposes.
Okay, but from a landscaping purpose, you need mulch in your beds to prevent weed growth. So I was wondering where that came from. So basically, they don't want mulch in the islands because it's all the wood chips, they get dry, it's a potential fire hazard.
Yes, that's
All
where
right.
that came from.
All right. I was gonna say, how do you make sure that your bed in your island without the use of mulch doesn't become a weed bed then?
Gravel.
Yeah, I guess you can use gravel.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know where that came from because I thought that was kind of, I thought mulch was generally used in landscaping.
Yeah.
It's actually surprisingly enough, it's a pretty common fire in the township, in our commercial areas. So
Yeah, but that's also why in some commercial areas you have like a bed of gravel with weeds in it, which
yeah,
is not very attractive. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, one, where did that come from? And two, how can we make sure that these islands are attractive? So when you're walking from your car to wherever you're going, you have shade, you have trees, you don't have a bunch of weeds and, trash in the area. And if you can figure out how to address that, I leave it up to you. That was just a comment. I'm wondering where that came from.
Okay.
And I'm quite content with shared parking. I think the township ought to use more shared parking. I did have one comment that it looked like in some of your minimum maximum spaces in your chart, you're still using terms like mini golf and batting cages and private country clubs. And I thought those had been removed from the district. Is that correct? Or are they back in, or how does that work?
They are out. The country club is out. Mini golf and batting cages. Did we take those out?
might have. We might need
I
to.
will double check that.
Okay.
Okay, so that was just, I was curious about to update that to be accordingly.
Yep.
Or stadiums, I didn't think we were gonna have like a stadium.
Guess
So-
we technically could.
I don't think that's the breadth. I mean, if you want a stadium in the industrial area by the railroad tracks, that's fine. I just don't think a stadium is the best use along US 23.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, I have a question. I mean, what if since we're bringing this up, I mean, what if this was, what if there somehow was like an outdoor concert thing in the middle of, I'm thinking of like Columbus Commons
Oh, in the
downtown.
middle of town green?
Yeah. So, I mean, what if there was like it was used for like to hold events? I mean, I know that's not a stadium, but does that need to be?
Well, wouldn't they need to get a permit from zoning to do that? Like a one-time special event or periodic special event permit?
Well, I was saying if there was like a park that was designed or built for
Like
something.
an event venue is what.
Yeah, like something that was like consistently, like the Commons has things all the time. So, I mean, having a permit for that every time would be pretty wild. But I mean, I have no idea if this will happen. My guess it would happen more in Evans Farm than on
Right.
23,
Well,
but
yeah, in the green space
so,
on the farm.
yeah,
That's what the barn's for, isn't it?
maybe.
I'm still waiting.
I don't know. So it was just a comment, but I don't think I don't know. Like stadium seems, I can't imagine a stadium coming in, but I guess the purpose of it was to just have it just in case. But
Honestly, the stadium was in there when we originally had schools in, and I was thinking of the football stadium,
yeah,
but schools are not in this any longer.
So I would just say, just be consistent. If you remove them,
Yep.
remove
Yep.
them. 'Cause then I'm worried that it'll be an opening, but we can go ahead and put a stadium in, or we can put in a mini golf or a batting cage, because you said we have parking provisions or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's mostly it. I had some comments, but they were having to do with the major minor amendment and parking and how parking counts and what's, but that sort of is still up in the air until you talk to the other stakeholders.
Yep.
And Christine, just one thing with the mini golf and batting cages, we do have one on 23 right now.
I know.
And currently their zoning does not allow a monument sign along 23. It's pretty restrictive on their signage for that place. So I think keeping the parking restrictions in there might be good in case they want to pull down the cloud and come under the zoning,
Okay.
just for signage purposes for that location if they choose to do so.
See, and I'm of the opinion, and this is just me, that I think there's better uses of land along 23 than a batting cage and mini golf. Like I said, I have no problem if it's like more in the mixed use or industrial area back behind 23, but right along 23, I just don't think it's I think there's better uses for the land that could give more value back to the community.
Okay.
So, and I think that was it. Yeah, the rest were just sort of like comments regarding the major and minor amendments and things of that nature and how they reflect back. Because you had like a whole list of what was considered major and minor, and some of them seem to contradict what was in your zoning text, but if you're removing that anyway, it doesn't matter.
I appreciate all of the comments we received tonight. This is very constructive comments and very helpful in making the document the best that it can be. So I really do appreciate it. And I will go back and look at all of these and address the text where necessary to accommodate the comments that were given tonight.
Great.
Hey, Michelle, was there anything on YouTube that
Yeah.
that we should mention? Any comments or anything?
No,
Okay.
no. I commented on the YouTube chat to make sure they knew it was on there, but we did not receive any comments this evening.
Does it show how many people are on there?
We had about 10.
10?
And no comments whatsoever from the public?
There were no comments.
All right.
Well, we're still on the meeting, so if those who are tuning in, if anyone has comments, please submit them now, and we'd be happy to either address them. And if you're not able to submit comments now, feel free to email our office. You can find our contact information on our website, and we can communicate from there.
I do have one question. This is just general sort of programmatic. What are the next steps? How is this process working? And that's just because I'm new. I'm sure everybody else is familiar except for me, so I apologize.
That's okay.
The last page of your packet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next steps, we just had our third zoning commission hearing.
Okay.
And then if the commission wants to, we'd be happy to take any more comments, or preferably in writing, by a week from today. So we can, if there's anything you forgot during this meeting, feel free to share them with me, and then I will pass them along to Holly to make those changes in the text. So I'd ask for the board's comments by Tuesday, August 11th. We are also receiving a second review from Regional Planning Commission. I did just get some feedback from Scott Sanders over at Regional Planning just before this meeting, so we'll review those. Staff's going to put a list of comments together, and then we'll continue working with legal next week. And then our goal is to have hopefully the last version of this text for the board to review on August 18th. And that will include all of everybody's comments, making the any map revisions. If we don't make the map revisions now, we'll definitely make them we'll make them as a stipulation. We currently, our GIS specialist resigned recently, so we're working on regional planning. Regional planning is fortunate enough to work on the maps with us, but we can make those changes with them. I will be sharing the report with you that I'll create, and then we'll have draft recommendations for the board to approve. For the fall, we're proposing to have the next zoning commission hearing on August 25th. And that would hopefully wrap it up.
Okay, so we're basically trying to, fine tune this document, and then there are, if there's issues that the zoning commission might have, we present them as stipulations to the trustees.
I think that's going to be the route we'll take. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. I wasn't sure how this is the end result, I guess. I assume it goes before the trustees and we make recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
So, Michelle, are we doing a?
We need to make a motion to recess at the next hearing date.
And it's the 18th, is that correct?
I would actually ask for the board to consider August 25th.
Or 25th, okay.
If
All right.
anybody's available.
Yeah.
25th on my calendar. So
Can I get a motion to recess Route 23 Corridor Overlay District meeting via virtual meeting to August 25th at 7 p.m.
so moved. Come on, Todd, you gotta second it.
No, I got to unmute. Second.
Okay. Motion made by Ms. Trubellis to recess the Route 23 Corridor Overlay District application to Tuesday, August 25th at 7 p.m. That meeting will be held in virtual matters. Second by Mr. Dove. Those voting, Mr. Pahovich,
Yes.
Ms. Trubellis,
Yes.
and Mr. Dove.
Yes, please.
All right.
Motion carries. Well, thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Meeting
All right.
adjourned. Have a good evening.
All right,
Take care.
Take
I
care.
know of their outstanding business, so I can sign off.
You can sign off.
Okay.